The way the story is going, you can kind of tell that we will be going back to the present reasonably soon, because Kuma has now found a cure for Bonney's hereditary disease, and both Vegapunk and Saturn have started to get more time in the spotlight. Plus, we got a significant portion of the answers that we needed. Kuma became the elected king of Sorbet Kingdom by standing up for its most vulnerable citizens, and Urusoso shocking the crap out of King Bekori, who was inspired by the events at Great Terminal to do the same thing in Sorbet. We actually got a panel last time of Ivankov saying that some of the revolutionaries were busy taking care of the wounded from Goa Kingdom, which was the point in time where Dragon and his group were able to pick up Sabo. And as most of us suspected, we also learned that it was thanks to King Bekori having the support of the world government that propaganda which labeled Kuma as a tyrant began to get published. So Kuma opposing the king's rule and destroying an armada of ships essentially marks the start of his life as a pirate. A bounty gets issued, which we know will eventually get suspended/frozen because of him getting offered the title of Shichibukai, which, by the way, I'm sure Saturn will be involved in that decision pretty soon as well. Also, I think a big reason for why we didn't get Kuma's bounty reveal here is because we had already gotten it. It used to be 296 mil, which is kind of low. Then again, I'm not really sure if the government knew that he was a Buccaneer at this point. All the while, King Bulldog, who had a previous history of ruling Sorbet, steps up to the throne in Kuma's absence. Now, the whole situation with King Bulldog and Queen Dowager Connie seems to be somewhat similar to the Riku family situation with Doflamingo, where at one point, the ruling family of Dressrosa was pushed out of power by someone with more sinister and selfish intentions. And now we know where Bonney's disguise during Reverie came from, because Connie used to be the queen of Sorbet, and I'm guessing that she used to rule the place along with her king husband, who eventually passed away. Now, there's something pretty weird going on with Bonney here. I find it strange that, as we know, she's been locked up in this church all this time, and yet somehow she's been able to eat a pretty broken devil fruit all of a sudden. Like, we don't know when she ate it, we don't know where she found it, and given the fact that the south section of Sorbet is pretty poverty-stricken, I would suspect that most people there, if they were to find a devil fruit, assuming they knew what it was, they would probably try and sell it, instead of leaving it in a church for a child to consume. Also, Bonney seems to be completely unaware of the fact that her power has activated at first. And just like everybody around her, she initially seems shocked about having an older appearance. And because we actually didn't get to see her eat the Toshi Toshi no Mi directly, it kind of gets me to think about Ginny and how at one point she mentioned that she was already 4 years older than Kuma, even though appearance-wise, that just didn't seem like the case. And so Ginny somehow being able to look younger than her actual age was something that never got explained. Like, we even see a little panel of Kuma being confused and finding it strange. So that definitely needs to be explained further, because according to Vegapunk, in order to replicate a Paramecia power, all you need is the DNA/bloodline elements of the Devil Fruit user to be able to grant the same power to somebody else. That's why the Seraphim can use Devil Fruit powers of characters that are still alive, like S-Snake being able to use Boa Hancock's powers. Also, Big Mom didn't really eat a Devil Fruit directly, but because she ate Mother Caramel, the powers got transferred to her. And so at least when it comes to Paramecias, which is what Bonney's power falls under, there are other ways of getting the type of power aside from eating a devil fruit directly. So if Ginny was already showcasing symptoms of age manipulation, and since we know that half a baby's DNA comes from their mother and the other half comes from their father, I wonder if Oda could be prepping us to reveal something major about devil fruits very soon. Another possibility here is that maybe Bonney had already eaten her devil fruit a lot earlier, but that the reason for why we're barely seeing the effects of it now is because she's actively wishing to become older. Also, maybe there's like a rule to her devil fruit power about how it only activates once the user reaches a certain age. You know, kind of how like Brooke's devil fruit, it only activates once the user dies. Now, I want to share an idea about something that I think could fit the story in a very neat way. But before that, it's important to note that Oda makes it a point here to remind us that we really don't know what makes Buccaneers special, aside from their durability and the composition of their muscles. I feel like there has to be something else, because if it just comes down to, oh, Buccaneers are special because they're strong and related to giants, I feel like that's not enough, because they were wiped out. Just like Lunarians. But Lunarians, we know, have an ability related to fire that grants them a special type of defense and speed, depending on how they apply their flame. And that obviously relates specifically to a relationship they must have had with the sun god. But Buccaneers are still a mystery. However, we do know that they were believers, that they were the ones responsible for keeping the faith in Nika alive. And so with that in mind, we know that Bonney at this point is under the erroneous impression that she can be cured from the Sapphire Scale condition once she turns 10. And so here we get a scene where she's doing laps, but she suddenly appears to be a lot older. So if we go back to the last chapter, we see that Bonney was 5 years old. But right before the end of the last chapter, there's a little box that says that a year passed, since then, which would then mean that at this point in the flashback, Bonney is 6 years old. Now, at one point, Vegapunk said that each devil fruit is essentially a wish, that devil fruits are a possibility of human evolution that someone desired at some point. And then in another scene that we got last year, which I'm pretty sure must have happened within the same conversation that we see Kuma and Vegapunk have in this chapter, Vegapunk tells Kuma that his power is special because it essentially allows him to take concepts that are intangible, such as pain and memories, and make them tangible, give them a shape and a form. So what we have here is the case of a little girl who is constantly dreaming and yearning to become 10 years old, and then all of a sudden she goes from looking like a 6-year-old to a 16-year-old, because I'm adding 10 years to the 6. We don't know how she got her devil fruit power, but we do know that she's been living under the care of someone who can make pain and memories tangible in reality. So could it be possible that maybe Kuma was able to manifest Bonney's dream of being older into reality? Because if that's the case, then we already know what a tangible dream in One Piece looks like. A dream that has taken tangible form in the world is a devil fruit, at least according to the smartest man in the story. And this goes back to that quote that we heard back at the start of Jaya about how anything that man can imagine is a possibility in reality. And it also goes back to Teach not being able to dream normally because he can't fall asleep, and him refusing that limitation by wanting to obtain a bunch of rare devil fruits. Now, going back to the idea of Kuma possibly manifesting / willing Bonney's devil fruit into existence, there's some seriously important dialogue that we got back in chapter 1069 from Vegapunk when Luffy is fighting Lucci, which, by the way, the cover page of that chapter is a shot of Dufeld with a Mads ship in the background with a flag that says pacifist on it. So that connects to this chapter very well. It's very fitting. So in that chapter, Vegapunk is talking to some of the Straw Hats about Nika, and he says, Nika has been erased from the historical record, but as long as people wish for him, his existence will never truly disappear. All things are brought into this world with hope. Yes, even the devil fruits. And again, one of the things that we know about Buccaneers is that they were kind of responsible for keeping the belief in Nika alive throughout the years. Oda continues to write Dragon in this flashback the same way that he writes post Dressrosa Usopp, because even after Ivankov and Inazuma get sent to Impel Down, he's just kind of sitting around making suggestions. Now, I've heard people theorize that he might have a big moment in chapter 1100, because chapter 100 was the chapter when Dragon was first introduced, so I'll definitely be hoping for something like that to happen soon, because aside from people making more and more educated guesses about what his devil fruit power actually is, Dragon as a character has been a whole lot of hot air in this flashback, pun intended. Bello Betty gets entrusted to be the commander of the Eastern Army of the Revos, which is the position that Ginny had previously held. But prior to that, Kuma was searching for a Sapphire Scale cure in the locations that he sent the Straw Hats to during the time skip. The only places I didn't see as part of the montage were Amazon Lily, which of course is where he sends Luffy to, the island where he sent Brook to, which looks like this, and then Kamabaka Queendom is also absent from the lineup. But given that Kuma was already really good friends with Ivankov, I feel like showing the island here would be kind of redundant. Kuma does, however, run into Abdullah and Jeet, who we know were former bounty hunters. Kuma sort of blows them up, which I'm pretty sure is Oda trying to showcase his unfunny sense of irony. For some reason, back in Dressrosa, Oda thought that it would be a good idea to introduce this duo as being responsible for a bombing incident. And speaking of stereotyping, the guys from Torino Kingdom, which is the place where Kuma sent Chopper to during the time skip, something I noticed is that they have the same eye symbol that we saw back in Wano with Bao Huang and the Marys. Personally, I thought that we were going to get the reveal that the characters with the eye symbol in Wano were going to have some connection with the Three-Eyed Tribe, and that's why they were all connected and were able to share their network of sight with each other, like spies. Also, Who's Who had the same symbol as a tattoo as well, and we never really got to see Who's Who's face. And regarding the civilization that Chopper met, at first Chopper misjudges them. Like, he stereotypes them and he says, well, I don't think they're pretty advanced, they're probably not really smart. But then he finds out that he was wrong, because they actually do have advanced weaponry, and they also have a huge library with botanical and medical information. And the reason I connect that to the Three-Eyed Tribe thematically is because having a third eye is typically used as a metaphor for enlightenment. Also, I remember once upon a time there was a mistranslation about Oda being asked, hey, what would happen if a normal human ate Chopper's human fruit? And the mistranslation quoted Oda as saying that if a human ate Chopper's fruit, they would become enlightened. And so even now, there is still some confusion in regards to what Oda actually meant, but I'm sure this Three-Eyed Tribe stuff will be explored further once Pudding comes back into the story, which should be happening relatively soon because we know that she was aboard one of Blackbeard's ships. Now, in the beginning, thing. There is a figure talking to Saturn that looks suspiciously a lot like Foxy, because he has the whole split head thing going on. Now, the notion that somebody like him would be up in Marijoa speaking to a Gorosei sounds pretty ridiculous at first, but I do want to look at the reasons for why Foxy being there would actually legitimately fit. And the first reason is that the character is updating Saturn on the new king of Sorbet. And we know for a fact that Sorbet Kingdom is located in the South Blue. Go ahead and guess where Foxy is from originally. He's from the South Blue.
Also, if we look at Foxy's history, there's a couple of things that we know about him. One is that he was born 38 years ago, which basically means that he was born the same year as the God Valley incident. We also know that he used to be a boxer, but he lost his boxing license because he was using a weapon to cheat, which I think serves to connect him to Saturn even more, because we know that Saturn is the godhead of science and defense. Plus, in this chapter, he's talking about the functionality of weapons. Now, if we follow the chronology of the timeline, at this point, Foxy would already be a pirate, because according to the One Piece Wiki timeline, 10 years ago, after hearing about Davy Jones, Foxy starts to amass a crew through Davy Back fights. Now, whenever I hear the name Davy Jones, my mind automatically goes to Blackbeard and Sebek, because the Davy Back fight originated in Hashinosu, and that's also where the Rocks Pirates were formed. Another connection here is that Davy Jones is also known as a sailor's devil, the devil of the sea. And here we have Foxy, who is obsessed with Davy Jones, talking to one of the Gorosei, who we know is a demon. Along the same lines, there's a bit of dialogue in this chapter that Kuma has where he says that as long as Bonney gets cured, he would be willing to make a deal with the devil himself. It's also not unheard of for pirates to be able to get into Marijoa, especially when they want something, when they want to negotiate with the government. I mean, Lafitte was able to get into a meeting at one point, and he was there to nominate Blackbeard to take Crocodile's spot as Shichibukai. On that note, we also know that Blackbeard wants to make a deal with the government because he wants Hashinosu to be recognized as an actual kingdom, and he wants to become the king of that. And as things pertain to Foxy, one of the things that I've been sort of mentioning is that a huge factor, a huge element that is part of this Egghead arc is the element of light. Light is all over the place. You know, we have Kizaru, we have the pacifistas who can use Kizaru's power, we have light gloves, we have holograms, we have the laser dome. At one point, Nami came across some artificial diamonds that can be used to refract light. And so we know that Foxy's power, the Noro Noro no Mi, Noro Noro Beam, is light-based. It uses photons to work. In the manga, when Foxy is introducing his powers, he basically says that the slowpoke photons that his powers use are an as of yet undiscovered particle. And so that relates to an advanced scientific discovery, which is literally what Vegapunk is all about. Egghead is the arc of light, science, and weapons. And so to me, there's literally no better time for Foxy to come back into the story than right now. Also, now we know why it was that Bonney said that she had been at Egghead before. So what's likely to happen is that Saturn will be using Vegapunk's ability to cure Bonney as a way to blackmail Kuma into complete submission, right? He has to give up his will and his memories and all that stuff. So Kuma is going to accept those terms. He's going to be blackmailed by Saturn, and that's why he will essentially lose himself in that process. Because Vegapunk says at one point that Kuma was the one who actually decided to go along with losing his mind, losing his will. I also think it's important to remember that the Mark III pacifistas are still at play here at Egghead, because Kuma does have a line here where he says that he hopes that the soldiers that are based off of him can actually help save people's lives in the future. So that could be possible foreshadowing for the Mark III pacifistas to help save people once we go back to Egghead in the present. Also, just an honorable mention, the entire gag of Connie being confused for Bonney and vice versa is freaking hilarious. Like, this panel right here, this small little panel, is literally my favorite panel of the entire chapter. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. I pretty much covered everything that I wanted here. You know, I really try hard to make these videos worthwhile, so thank you so much for all of your support. I hope you guys have a great start to your week. Take care, and I will catch you guys back here for chapter 1100. Some people kind of get upset if I don't wave goodbye, so bye.